In the previous two videos, I spoke about how I grew up. I spoke about some of the challenges, the traumas, the personal experiences that I've lived through, and how all of that has contributed to my own personal growth, my own personal understanding of life, myself, human beings, and how I would also translate a lot of that into my work as an acting coach and as a director, as well as a life coach and an NLP practitioner. And this video is going to be mainly focused on my years, my 20s, possibly some of the early 30s. I'll try not to go on too long in this video. But my 20s were, I would say, that's where most of my life trauma, my life difficulties feel like they came to a head. My family was falling apart. My parents were divorcing. My sister had developed all sorts of psychiatric issues that we couldn't quite pinpoint. She was going in and out of institutions. My father had bonded with his mistress, and my brother was really nowhere to be seen or heard from. And it really just felt like my mother, my sister, and I were alone. And in those years, I was going to university. I was studying acting and performance and directing, and that was my passion. I loved it. I still love it. But I can say this now in retrospect. I think so many of those years, and part of why I was pouring time and focus and energy into building my craft as a storyteller, as an artist, was also partly motivated by my desire to try to get away from the turmoil and the conflict and the difficulty and the heaviness that was really going on in my private life. And I was channeling so much of what was going on in my private life into my art. And I found for myself that that was one of the reasons that I gravitated towards theater, performance, and teaching, particularly because I understood human emotion, human struggle so intimately that as I was trying to figure it out, and in my process of trying to figure it out myself, I was able to relay it to actors and to direct what I would call emotional truth in their performances. But in those years, and God bless my friends who were witness to most of this, most of that work in those years was pretty dark. I gravitated towards intense dramas, heavy conflicts, because I was trying to purge my own heaviness through the art form. And I do believe that all artists really use what they know, what they've lived through, what they have firsthand experience. We've all heard the phrase, for example, writers must write what they know, what they've lived through. And I think the same is for actors, for performers. We speak so often in the world of acting that one needs to be a truth teller. And what was quite remarkable was I adored being a director and a teacher and an acting coach. And I think so much of my healing and my processing from my own life was happening through my craft, through my studies, which would later become my career, and how I would impart that knowledge to the students and the actors I was working with. But in the background, I myself was not healed. I was still very traumatized. I can use that language now. That wasn't the language of the time. I suppose at the time we'd just say, I was just so pissed off and angry and rageful. But, those emotions don't come out of nowhere. And if you've followed the previous two videos, you'll have a very good idea as to why. But in summary, I felt as if I had been experiencing what I would now call family abandonment wounds and abandonment traumas, particularly from my father and my brother. And I felt as if the world and all the responsibilities of that fell on my shoulders. My mother was still trying to heal and still trying to find some sort of normality after her cancer diagnosis, the cancer removal, and all of that, which was happening as The divorce started as well, so she had her own conflicts. And my sister, and I don't want to speak too much on behalf of my sister, her life and her story is hers, but I will say this as a person who witnessed it. My father, who absolutely was a BPD, narcissistic human being, disordered, was triangulating, which is the literature language, my sister against, well, everybody else. You know, narcissists just want supply. They want attention. That's how they validate themselves. They don't care if you are a blood relative or not. They will carry on abusing you if it makes them feel a little bit better. And I can tell you that my sister could fill videos with stories over her mistreatment from my father. And as I've said to her, and she does agree with me, the language for that, and I'll summarize it as trauma. And her trauma set her off on what became 10 years of what I called the dark night of the soul. And my mom and I would tag team to keep an eye on my sister because she didn't want to be here. And there was an enormous amount of fear and anxiety and stress. And that didn't last for a couple of months. That went on for a couple of years. And it went on for the full period of while I was studying at university and even for the years that followed. My compassion and my understanding for my clients and my students who are going through life difficulties, it all comes from my own experience. I became a coach because I felt like I felt like it chose me. If it were left to me, I would have lived in rehearsal rooms working with actors all day, every day. But that's just not what the universe spirit handed me. I learned psychology because I had no choice, to try and understand what was going on with my sister, who was misdiagnosed several times and was given far too many psychiatric drugs. I mean, we're talking boxes of medication. And my mom and I were trying to understand and hold space and at the same time, you know, survive and live our lives. So psychology and the importance of learning the complexity of the human condition felt thrust upon me. And I didn't ask for it, but it was a consistent part of my existence. And I was learning all of that. And at the same time, my craft as a director and as an acting coach also demanded that I knew the human condition. In the world of acting, we often speak about characters needing subtext. In other words, that which human beings do not say, but it is a driving force in them at all times. It's how they speak to themselves, it's where their beliefs come from, etc. And in the world of psychology and neuroscience and the work that I do now, I would call that the conditioned mind, the subconscious mind, where all of our beliefs and our feelings and our experiences are stored. It is quite literally why the subconscious mind is why we see the world as we see it, why we feel the way we feel, why we behave the way we behave. So I was doing all of that work professionally with my students and in the theater, and in my personal life, which I was keeping pretty private. These videos have been quite interesting for me because I am a private person, so I am sharing this because, you know, dear viewer, if you are anything like me and at that phase of my life where I was seriously struggling, and it would have helped if I'd gone to see someone. It would have been very helpful if I got an idea of who someone was before I went to see them. I know how hard it is to ask for help. I know how hard it is to seek help. I say this to all of my own clients and my students. If they sign up with me, I say it right at the beginning. I take your commitment to this very seriously because I know how vulnerable you must feel signing up for this. And I'm doing these videos in the hope that it can It can reassure somebody that you are actually not alone. And the difficulties and the struggles and the traumas, and quite frankly, the emotional tsunamis that you feel like you are trying to keep head above water and navigate all day, every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. You are not alone. But that kind of hell and that torture doesn't have to feel like that. And I did not know that until I went and studied my own qualifications as a life coach. And as I was doing all of that work, I kept thinking, my goodness, why don't we do this for performers? Performers of all people should also understand how they're wired, how do they think, how do they feel, where does this come from? Because if you're an actor watching this, you might relate. I would say this to my own students. There's a difference between acting and presenting. And those who present because they are too afraid of being emotionally vulnerable. Great actors are great actors because they are emotionally vulnerable. They are available to the moment. And that availability is very, 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 very scary if you don't feel safe in the world, you don't feel respected. And if I were to bring this to a point, I would say that you struggle in the world if you struggle with yourself. I know that sounds painfully obvious, doesn't it? We struggle in the world because we don't understand who we are. We don't practice self-compassion and self-empathy, but my goodness, we understand the people around us and what they want from us and how we need to deliver, etc., etc. But if you ask a person more than 5 questions about themselves and you go a little bit deeper, you'll realize that most people don't really know who they are, what they are, why they function the way that they function. So this is most of us. So my 20s were a very conflicted time in my life. It was a period in my life where I was relying on substances and drugs to try and decompress the emotional intensity, the stress, the anxiety I was experiencing all the time. And if you paid attention in the previous 2 videos, you will also know that I had what I can only now describe as blinding rage. Blinding rage. I suppose in that period of life, I wasn't self-aware enough to know that this anger and this rage is here because I'm actually sad. I'm disappointed. I feel betrayed by my family, by my father in particular, who literally dumped us. If my father had his way in those years, he would have liked to have seen me, my sister, and my mother on the streets. And if you are related to a narcissist, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. These are not empathic, kind, warm people. These are people who are governed by, well, their egos, in a word. There's so much I could speak about. And in fact, I'm planning on doing a few videos on this in the future, but this video is about me. And I did not know in those years what my father was. I just saw it as disgusting behavior. And his behavior was triggering me because I felt as if at that phase of my life, in my late teens, early 20s, the responsibility of support and care and love fell to me. And dear viewer, I would be lying if I said that didn't feel unfair. And I love my sister. I love her. I love her in ways that I don't love other people. And I would do it again. I would be there for her again. But I can tell you now, and if you are a family member of somebody who's struggling, you'll relate to this. It is incredibly hard to love somebody who is very close to you and to feel helpless and hopeless in trying to assist them and help them find their groove and their passion in life again. And I honestly think that embedded something into me as a director, as a coach, as an acting coach. It doesn't really matter who I'm working with. I have within me something that feels like a very organic and very important desire to help. Life is so hard. Life is hard. And we struggle through a lot of it. And so much of how we struggle isn't necessary. If we learn certain tools, if we learn the mechanics of how we are wired as human beings, we start to develop what I started to develop later in life, self-awareness. And self-awareness starts to lead to mindfulness. And mindfulness leads to conscious choice. And choice is where you change the game. Choice is where you realize I don't have to, well, I don't have to do anything. But I get to choose the rhythm, the tempo, and the passions of my existence. And that doesn't have to be up to another person, although if you've been traumatized and as heavily codependent as I've been, you do believe that your quality existence is tied into the hands of somebody else. How they treat you or don't treat you, how they love you, don't love you, if they're there for you, not there for you. You start to see yourself only through the lens of other people, which in my experience is what all of us do who were raised by narcissists or disordered humans. Because what does a child know? A child doesn't know, oh, mom or dad is disordered, let me not take them personally. Children see the world as an extension of them, and they see their parents especially as an extension of them. If mommy is sad, it's because of me. If daddy is sad, because of me. We don't understand that as children, we don't understand that human beings are autonomous and they are fully independent beings. So what we end up doing is we start taking that personally, we absorb that, and that starts to go into all of our relationships. And ultimately what else happens, and this is where the heart of my work is with a lot of my students and my clients, is it affects how you speak to yourself. It literally affects the beliefs that you have. It affects the paradigm that you hold. So my work, whether I'm working with an artist or not, whether I work with actors or a life coaching client, so much of it's similar in the sense of I want you to find your center, your alignment. I want you to know how powerful you are. I want you to realize that you don't actually have to feel so responsible for the people around you. And as I say to my own students and clients, you need to pick your audience very carefully. Not everyone is worthy of your attention. Not everyone is worthy of your love. And we have to learn this. We have to learn this the hard way. And Lord knows I learned it the hard way too. So my 20s were messy, and I had to give up drugs and alcohol because I realized it was quite literally destroying me. And this is the tough part, dear viewer. I had to learn the hardest thing. I had to learn to process my feelings. I had to learn how to feel emotion, which is ironic for an acting coach, isn't it? And of course, this is the work that I've been doing with all of my guys over the last number of years. But everything I do, everything I teach, every point of view that I have that I come to is all from personal experience. So I know how hard it is to process rage, devastation, depression, sadness. Processing, by the way, does not mean let go and never feel again. It means learn to make room for. You can't do that if you're at war with yourself. And I was absolutely at war with myself because I was at war with my circumstances. And I couldn't change those circumstances. That was building frustration and anxiety and stress. And then I started to aim that inwards because, then I must be failing. It must be because of me. Life is falling apart because of me. And then we go into all of these, what we would call limiting beliefs or negative self-talk. So the work that I do is about helping people start to navigate their way through that fogginess and to find personal clarity. And once you are in a space of personal clarity, then you can start to feel less hopeless. And you can start to recognize, I really can influence and direct the rhythms, the patterns, and the focus of my own existence. And that is a powerful place to be. But the language I often give that is spirit. And I know that many people are, although the world is changing, they would. I giggle with some of my own clients. We talk about, oh, this might sound quite woo woo, but I'm very woo woo. I'm very into the woo woo because the woo woo is where the healing is. The woo woo is where the answers and the clarity are. They are not in what I would symbolically call accounting. Excel spreadsheets don't work with personal growth. Healing, by definition, is messy, clumsy, 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. That is the nature of healing. And when we learn that that is actually not a negative thing, that's almost the gift of it, the gift of healing, the gift of growth, the gift of soul evolution, is it has to be a conscious daily awareness. That's actually the point. So there's nothing wrong or bad because one doesn't feel huge, radical changes in a short amount of time. I often like to say to my students that you are a piece of nature. Your ego might distract you and say otherwise, but you are actually a piece of nature. You are like a little tree, and a tree must grow at the pace that a tree must grow at. Healing is similar. Personal growth is similar. Things take as long as they take. And I suppose in some ways, that's what my entire life has been. I am not an authority. I don't see myself as that. I do not see myself as some sort of guru on some sort of mountaintop. I see myself as side by side to the people that I work with. I am not above you. I am walking alongside you because that's what I wanted. That's what I desperately needed in my 20s. Well, most of my life, but especially my 20s. The years of chaos. And there were lots of fun, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of pain. And that pain even went into the early part of my 30s. Being this side of 40 feels amazing. And it's the space that I am in now, the space of what feels like a more anchored and more peaceful existence that I want to impart to those who are looking for it. It really is that simple. I will keep doing this for years because I want to be the coach that I desperately needed. I want to be the source of help and aid to another person that I know I needed, which is why, and a lot of my students and my clients tease me about this. They go, are you psychic? Maybe, but I'm self-aware enough and I have owned my story. And I know what my triggers are, and I know what was and what wasn't mine. As I say in sessions quite a bit, we must learn how to hand the damage back to where it belongs. And that took me quite a few years, and I had to learn boundaries, I had to learn self-esteem practices. Our lives are full of challenges, but they don't have to feel impossible. And that is one of the reasons I'm doing these videos. I would like my prospective clients who are very scared. I see you. I know what you are going through. I know how unnerving it is. I know how intimidating it can feel because I was there too. I used to say, oh God, why do I want to go and see a therapist? What do I want to do that for? But actually what I was mostly afraid of was the business of getting my hands dirty in myself and to really affect myself positively. I knew intuitively that if I was going to do this work, I was going to change. And change, not only is change scary, change involves, well, processing emotion, difficult, scary emotion. But I've got news for you, dear viewer. Emotion will not kill you. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel intense. It so often is trauma working its way out through the body, but it is nothing to be afraid of. I have been doing this work for a long time, and at first it began with actors because I would lead workshops or classes, and to help actors step into very hectic and emotionally fraught scenes where the characters are fighting or are explosive or breaking down. You know, in the world of acting, we speak about different styles and realism as a style. And that is one of the things that I would help actors in, is how to act realistically. But everything I was teaching came from my own life observations and what I'd lived through, what I grew up around, which is kind of how I knew whether their intensity was true or not. And the years of doing that work, I am deeply reassured by something. No one wants to feel that work at first, whether you're an actor or not. Nobody wants to go to, I call it the dangerous place. Nobody wants to go to the dangerous place because of what that voice in the head is saying. Oh, I'll never survive this. Oh, what will people think of me? Whatever the language is. And you know, this humbles me. This gives me. I can get quite emotional when I examine it, because people are terrified of it at first until they do it, and then the relief is amazing. The feeling of that's what I want for you. I want you to feel relief because it's worth it. It's worth the temporary pain to have a much longer sense of tranquility and a sense of anchoredness in this already difficult thing we call life. So that, in a nutshell, is one of the things that I wanted to mention in terms of that phase of my life. And if this resonates with you, please do like and follow. I would like to grow this channel, and if there are any particular topics that you would like me to speak about, please comment below. And thank you for your time, and thank you for watching.